You're watching ABC4 News.
Welcome back. We're taking some time today to discuss what can be a difficult topic. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Domestic violence happens every day across the country, but there can be some signs that are often difficult to spot. So we're taking a closer look at that. Joining us now is Catherine Aguilera. She is the Associate Director for the Peace House, a domestic violence resource center based in Summit County. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit on what exactly your organization does.
So Peace House is dedicated to supporting survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. We're located in Park City, Utah, but we are part of this interconnected network of supports around Utah. So we do serve those that are outside of Summit and Wasatch County, but that is our focus area.
What does domestic violence look like in Utah? I know the numbers aren't great.
That's such a great question. You know, it's actually very common, and I think that's what you're referring to when you say not that great.
Right.
It's very common. So 1 in 3 women will experience some type of interpersonal abuse in their lifetime. And I personally know way more than 3 women, and I'm sure you do too. So it's very, very prevalent, and it's an issue that is hidden, has some stigma, but is all around us.
It's hidden, so how are we able to help women? I mean, I know a lot of times the signs aren't as clear as we may think.
That's so true. So some common signs could look like isolation from family and friends. It could also look like post-traumatic symptoms, right? It could look like an inability and loss of autonomy to choose and have self-determination. It could look like financial restriction. Those are some common forms and ways that we can look at. It's also really interesting because a lot of sexual violence and domestic violence has been normalized in the media. So there's also a community unlearning that we need to engage in.
We certainly do. And during the commercial break, we were talking about the most dangerous time for a domestic violence victim is right when they decide to leave their abuser. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I recently learned a statistic that I'd like to share with y'all. So 42% of homicides in Utah are attributed to domestic violence incidents. So it is the most critical time to support a survivor of domestic violence when they decide to leave. And thankfully that's why there are resources like a Peace House and surrounding area resources.
Tell us a little bit more about those resources that you provide. You mentioned there's transitional housing.
Yes, thanks for asking. So transitional housing, so a lot of people don't know that a lot of the programs that are available for survivors to engage in have a waiting list and a lot of prerequisites that folks have to jump through to qualify. So it's an average of 2 years to wait for some of these programs, assistant programs. So transitional housing really helps that gap, right? It allows us to give someone some space to not only recover from abuse, but to map out some next steps. I think if we can take a moment to empathize and think about what would it look like to have to completely change your everyday, your housing situation, and to, you know, the complexity of what if you have children and you have to pick up and leave with children and find a new place to live and find new neighbors and new support systems. It can get pretty intense. So transitional housing really allows us to provide a space and opportunity for folks to transition into self-sufficiency again while they apply for programs of assistance, while they find a new job, while they wait for their first paycheck.
That's amazing that you guys have that available, especially as you mentioned that 2-year wait period. That's heartbreaking to hear.
Yeah.
Before we go, where can people find more information about your organization?
Well, definitely visit peacehouse.org. Also, our Utah Domestic Violence Coalition, UDVC, is a great resource. The link line, the helpline at Peace House, you know, we have an opportunity to be the light and support survivors and stay within our wheelhouse, right? And that's to know the resources and get people connected.
Right, shining some light during dark times. Catherine Aguilera, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, let's toss it over to Thomas.